What's going on, irregulars? Welcome back on another Thursday. It is Katie. Bobby, how we feeling?
It's your boy Bobby. I have to say it, right?
Every
Have to
time.
say it. Every time. What's going on, Caitlin? How are you?
Well, I'd like to say that it's Saturday morning.
Yes, it is.
Well, actually, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but it feels like morning.
Yeah, it's true.
And
Caitlin was supposed to be here at noon to record, and here we are. You know, a little late as usual.
I
but
didn't show up that late, but
it was like 20 minutes, but yeah.
But we just bullshit a lot before we end up recording.
This is true.
Why these things take so long. But regardless, the point of that is I'm not hungover, people.
Yes. Thank God, because sometimes when you're hungover, it's hard to get you motivated.
It's like the Loch Ness Monster.
How is that a comparison?
Because that's what I look like. Probably what I smell like.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Like a river rat.
Nice. So that's why my DMs are empty. But anyway.
Here we are.
I did just want to quickly say, though, I don't know if you guys follow me on my Instagram page. You should if you don't. But I posted this week about just kind of like an irregular appreciation post. I was reflecting a lot. I haven't really posted like a big
like emotional
reveal kind of. I've done a couple things on my story, but it was just nice to kind of just sit there and like look through all the guests that I've experienced during my time here with Irregular. And I just wanted to say thanks, number one, to Bobby for bringing me on. But more than that, thank you to the listeners and all of our guests. Like, it's just, when Bobby called me and asked me to do this in December, I was just like, cool. Like, you know, I was looking for another creative outlet to kind of channel my energy into. And I was really excited about that piece of it too. But Bobby and I shoot the shit all the time. And I was like, great, I can just talk shit with my friend on a microphone all day. This is gonna be great. Like, I did not. Yeah, I didn't see it taking the turn that it did. And I feel like.
Or like having the impact that it did on you. Yeah,
mm-hmm. I think that our visions aligned so much more than I ever imagined that they would. And it's
really weird too, because we think drastically different.
We really do.
A lot of people don't. I've had people that are like, oh my gosh, you guys are very like similar, and I'm like, you have no idea that we are very different people, you know. And I think that's cool. Like, it's give and take, and I don't know if that really projects well onto the podcast,
but it shouldn't. But you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
I don't know. It's really weird. Like, I think we have a different chemistry that just, it doesn't make sense.
But it's also, I feel lucky because we are so close, and it's been such an opportunity for growth for me, because it's like the things that, like, you know how when you know you need to work on something, like, and you know it, but no one says it to you because it's hard. It's hard to hear. But you and I have such a transparent relationship. Like, we have the hard conversations, and it is a little awkward, but we get through it, and I feel so blessed for that aspect of it as well too.
Yeah, I mean, again, you know, she made this long post and like said all these nice things, not only about the podcast itself, but even about me. And I'm just like sitting there, and my comment back literally was, how the fuck am I supposed to write anything back compared to that? Like, what am I supposed to, how am I supposed to follow up to that? Like, that's like, you know, Michael Jordan's replacement. Like, you can't do that. So I was just like, damn, like, thank you. I think I just put the rocker hands in the black heart. I was just like, thanks.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. Stand still and look pretty, and people like that. So.
Yeah, it was a really cool post, and it's true. And you know, I liked how you included like pictures of all the like, you know, a handful of the guests that we've had, and this and the other thing. And like, this podcast is really, it's crazy. If you asked me what I was gonna do in fucking 10th grade or 12th grade, I'd been like,
even a year ago, I wouldn't have known.
No way. And I'm just like, oh well. And then here we are, and I'm like, I was talking to, who was I talking about the other day with? I was texting with someone, and I was just like, yeah, I mean, regardless, I'm having fun. I don't fucking care. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, I'm having fun, and it is what it is. And until I stop having fun, then that's when Caitlin and I need to go back to the drawing board. But, you know, we're killing it now.
Yeah, and we do have a couple of awesome guests lined up in the pipeline for you guys. But that said, too, like, we always say we're always looking for guests. It's been really cool to see people actually start reaching out once we put that out there.
Yeah, because a lot of people, like, we had to start to we cultivated ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're like, hey, I think this person would be interesting, and then all of a sudden, like, slowly but surely, like, I'm getting more and more DMs about like, hey man, what about this? Or hey, we should do that. Hey, I would like to come on. And it's always like awkward at first. I feel like for them to ask, and it's like, dude, I hope you understand that like the smile that lights up on my face, and more than likely Caitlin too, when someone says like, hey, I think we can talk about this, like, that makes us one, it makes our job a little bit easier.
So
Two,
much easier.
two, it that's exciting. We're like, fuck yeah, like let's go.
Yeah,
You know
and
what I
it's
mean?
interesting too, like the topics that we've brought on that I've been like, I don't really know how this is going to be received just because I'm just not familiar with it, are the ones that always make the most impact and have the biggest splash.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty crazy. And I'm just happy with some of the things that you've brought on as well too, like some of the topics that you've wanted to talk about or guests that you want to have on. And you're like, hey man, like let's look at this. I'm like, same thing. Like, how am I gonna talk to this? Like, I don't, my age old saying, I don't know shit about fuck. You know what I mean? But
And yet you do.
and then all of a sudden, before you know it, I'm sitting here with my jaw dropped, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so much to actually say about this and whatnot. So, I mean, just I guess the whole point of this intro is kind of just like appreciation. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's been crazy. The crazy ride thus far. We're still cooking.
Yeah,
And
and I
it's
feel like today's guest that we have, I'll let you introduce him because he is your friend, but I'm sitting here with the cheesiest smile on my face because we are working on something so exciting this weekend. I can't wait to tell you guys about it.
yeah, it's gonna be I'm shaking a
I
little bit. Yeah, a
know.
little shook, but we're gonna get it together. It's gonna be very professional. It's gonna be good. It's
It's
gonna
gonna
be
be
great.
awesome. So the reason why we have our guest here today, who's actually flown up from Florida, one of your buddies from down there, is to help us with the project this weekend. So we thought he's here. Let's bring him on.
Yeah. He's been on the show before, and he speaks so well, and he's such a good friend of mine, and he has something that he really is passionate about, and I think he's got a good point because him and I have this relationship and whatnot. But I do want to introduce Joey again. He was on episode, I believe, 12. I think it was 11 or 12, something like that, on the back half with Mike O'Malley. And so we're gonna bring Joey on. How you doing, Joe?
I've never had a bad day in my life, Bobby. How are you?
Oh,
Hey, let's go. It's funny too because Joe has since stolen that saying from me, which is fine. I'm okay with giving it out. And how many compliments have you gotten on that since you started saying it? Probably what, like 8 months ago, 8, 9 months ago?
I find that people don't really know how to respond to it. Believe it or not, they're kind of taken aback initially, and I have a couple people that actually have challenged it.
I
And
would. I still do, but
yeah, like
Yeah.
when you say that, you're kind of like, yeah, is that actually true though? Do you believe that? And then I kind of explain to them, it's a mindset. You
Yeah.
know,
see, and to me, I'm like, I feel like you're deflecting. Do you want to talk about that?
Do you want to talk about this? And then all of a sudden I start crying. I'm like, yes. No,
No,
no.
I probably start crying because I'm like, well, since we mentioned it, like I have something to talk about.
Of course, you just selfishly bring yourself into it. But we brought Joe on because Joe was like, hey man, while I'm up here, like, do you want to record something? And I was like, yeah, sure. I was like, do you have something in mind? And he was like, yeah, I would love to talk about like male to male appreciation and
and appreciation for friends, family, even people you're not necessarily close to in general, people maybe that you interact with every day. And I find that in our culture it's I don't know if it's stigmatized. I would say among men it's a little bit more challenging to be open and express affection and appreciation. I don't exactly know why, but it's something that I try to make a conscious effort to change on my part. And I'll be honest, it requires stepping outside of your comfort zone sometimes because it's not something we're used to doing collectively. So it's just small compliments here and there. And as Bobby touched on, our relationship, I don't remember when we started doing this, but pretty much at the end of every conversation, we'll be like, all right, I love you, dude. And, the other will respond with love you too. And I just think that's hugely important because, things happen, we get caught up, and then before you know it, there could be a tragedy, there could be, a missed opportunity to let somebody know that. And so I think being aware of that can kind of change how you approach interacting with people on a day-to-day basis.
yeah, and I agree. And I think one of the things that I wanted to actually bring up is, and we can edit this out because it might be a little bit too personal for you, which is fine. But I find that one thing that I found about myself is that my friends always kind of confide themselves in me, and whether that's about personal things that they're afraid to discuss with their parents or their significant others or whatever.
Do you mean like guys?
Yeah,
Okay.
mainly guys. Yeah, like
Okay.
I find that my guy friends are drawn to me to tell me these things that I guess are buried deep down inside of me, or down in them. And I don't know if that's a testament to me or to how great they are as
I
people.
think
And
it's both. I think you definitely have more empathy than many men, but in the same breath, you have really good friends too.
yeah, I have the best friends in the world. I think I've posted that on my Instagram and Facebook and everything else entirely way too many times. But whatever, here we are. That I challenge you to find better friends than I do, that I have. It's just impossible.
I hope I'm included in. Actually, I'm gonna mentally include myself in that.
All
Anyway,
right, perfect. But I think Joe, you had mentioned before, you're like, I don't know really where this started, and I do have a point here to bring this back into when I originally just started talking about a minute ago. Is do you remember that night down in Florida where you were hurting
Yeah.
over some stuff?
Yeah.
And I had mentioned it on a previous podcast before where I had a friend who was in a bad place. He was in a bad way. And he literally texted me and was just like, I need to talk and I need it now. And I'm like, come over.
Yeah.
And Joe is that person. Joe reached out and was like, I am not good. I am not well. I am feeling like shit. I need you. And it was funny because at that point in time, you and I really weren't that great of friends.
Right. That was I don't think with that night was probably the turning point.
Absolutely.
I would say.
Like we were friends, but like it was friends like, hey man, see you around the car, the shop and whatnot, or see you at a car show or anything. And then it was like, yo, I don't know what drew you to me and
so
whatever.
can I ask Joe?
Absolutely.
What was that like for you? Feeling like, okay, I'm crossing this boundary that I assume you've never crossed with Bobby before. I don't know if you had crossed it previously with other friends, but what was that like for you to realize that you needed help from one of your guy friends? And like, how did you process being able to ask Bobby for that help?
Well, given the hard time that I was going through, I had only been down in Florida I had been down in South Florida because previously I had lived in St. Augustine while I was going to school. I had only been down there for, I would say, 7 or 8 months at that point. And I did have friends that I had made, many of whom I'm still friends with to this day. But something that I unfortunately have experienced in South Florida, I've always had this sense about people, and it's sort of a gauge of their authenticity. And I find that unfortunately, so many of the people that I've encountered, maybe it's the line of work I'm in South, excuse me, in South Florida in particular. There's not a ton of authenticity.
And what line of work are you in, just to ask?
So I do marketing, and I'm a freelance photographer and videographer, and I work a lot with cars, super high end cars, exotics, things like that.
Okay, so you're on like bougie people a lot.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And so there was something about Bobby that there was an authenticity that I recognized, and I recognized somebody who had been through a pretty serious struggle themselves, given that he had cancer and overcame the cancer. And correct me if I'm wrong, Bobby, but the never had a bad day in my life line actually was something that you came up with during that time.
I had a coworker say it to me once before, and then when that happened to me, when those events kind of unfolded or whatnot, I kind of just started saying it a little bit more, and then it took off from there. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So to answer your question, Caitlin,
Oh, he calls me Caitlin too, guys.
given that sort of hypothetical gauge of authenticity, I recognized that in Bobby, and I didn't feel like there was anybody else in Florida or in that area that I could go to at that time. And he was pretty much the first person that came to mind. I was like, I should reach out to him. I've spent some time with him. At that point, we had been going out to get food pretty regularly. Bobby was always my
lunch and dinner buddy.
Exactly. Yeah. And now I eat alone, so
Aw.
no, it's okay.
We FaceTime and then
we do. And so I reached out, and he was, without skipping a beat, he's like, "What do you need? Let's go." And we ended up going for a drive, and I spent.
Yeah, we like shot the shit in the house for a little while, because it was just us. My roommate at the time wasn't around. He was out not doing whatever. But and then once he came home, I was like, I don't think we're done here. You kind of like gave each other that look, like this conversation's not done. And he was like, yeah. I'm like, all right, let's go drive. And I think we drove around for another like 2 or 3 hours. Got like Taco Bell and just fucking shot the shit.
And that sounds like so crazy to me because that's not. I hate to say it, but that's not normal.
No.
Guys don't do that.
No.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, anyway.
And I think that that kind of carries on towards another point, which is there is a huge apprehension collectively about reaching out for help. And I don't know if it was something about who Bobby is or how he maybe opened the door for me to know that I could come to him for whatever. That I was like, this is a guy that I can trust. This is somebody that I can be vulnerable with and allow myself to use as a rock when I'm in a hard place, and I absolutely was. And so I think it's important to try and uncover that in people. And when you find somebody who's authentic, don't be afraid to reach out. But by the same token, allow yourself to be that person when someone else is in need.
It's crazy to think about too, because I think the three of us sitting here, I just met you last night actually, Joe. But I think the three of us can say that we have and both are those friends to other people, right? And I'm so fortunate, like you guys all met Liv, my very best friend.
Yeah.
Her and quite a few of my other friends have that open dialogue. Like, are you okay? Do you need to talk? And we can get really deep into shit and not be afraid to give each other the hard advice, but have a good gauge of when that should come and when it shouldn't. But I've realized as I've started making some different friends, that's not the case a lot of the time.
Yeah,
Like I
that's
have
not the norm.
yeah, I have a good friend who she'll reach out and I'll say, I'll reinforce things. I'll tell her the hard things. And this is the first time in her life she's ever had a friend in her life that's done that for her. And I'm like, how are you almost 30 years old and this is your first experience with that? That breaks my
How did you
heart
make
for
it this
people.
far?
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't be able to do it.
That
You know
breaks
what
my
I mean?
heart for
Like,
people.
me and Wagner are that way, you know what I mean? And Wagner's been one of my best friends since I was 8 years old, and he knows practically Wagner probably knows me better than I know myself. You know what I mean? That's just our relationship. So, like, I've been fortunate enough to have that really all through pretty much middle school, high school. Now, of course, the depth of the conversations of like my issues and whatnot in middle school and high school are not very deep for the most part. You know what I mean? So, like,
They feel deep at the time though.
yeah, they feel like it's the worst thing on everything. Oh my God, I failed a test. And I'm like, I want to die. And you're like, no, it's okay. It's not a big deal. It's just social studies. You know what I mean? Like, but, I've been fortunate enough to have that. And then Wagner was my roommate in college and this and the other thing. So I don't know how someone would have made it to where I'm at now without someone like that. And it's unfortunate that we have this stigma, especially, and sorry, ladies, but this episode is going to be mainly geared towards guys because I feel like girls can find that in each other a little bit more, whether or not they're authentic about it or not, because you know how girls can get when they...
See, I don't even know if it's about authenticity. I think it's about opening yourself up. I think that people who open themselves up more willingly connect with people who are willing to do the same for them in return.
Mhm.
I think it's for us, it's more about walls, but I
And
think that directly relates to what you're talking about because men are reluctant to open themselves up to people.
and that reminds me of kind of the notion about having lots of friends that maybe all exist on a very surface level versus having a very few that you can rely on and you can open up to, and they know they can open up to you as
Right.
well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's huge. I know everybody. I mean, Caitlin and I,
Mhm.
our networks combined in this, uh, northern Philadelphia suburban area it reaches very, very far. But if I really had to sit down and like pinpoint like who are my friends, that circle is drastically smaller
Well, I
than
mean, yeah, last weekend when I had a little meltdown last weekend and I called like 5 people. I'm like, I need you guys here
now.
now.
Yeah.
And guess what? Every single one had plans and every single one canceled and showed up for me.
Yeah. And I think that's huge, and I mean, how many times, Joe, have I've gone on a date and been nervous and called him like, Joe, help
Yeah,
me and
yeah.
talk me out of this, help
And
me or talk me down.
I give you that solid advice, but then when I'm in your boat, I'm like, Bobby, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah, right. And here we
I can
are.
give the advice, but I certainly can't take it.
Yeah. I mean, how much of it do you think is like a maturity thing though?
Oh, I think that's huge.
You know what I mean? Like, do you think do you think this is normal and we're just starting to realize it now because we're getting older? Or do you think this is something that we don't know or we didn't know before and we're starting to because like the whole like mental health thing and whatnot, that's really starting to get more traction under it
Yeah.
within the last like 5 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I would say. So like, do you think this is something that has been around for a while and it's just normal.
Normalized
Like,
now.
yeah, well, no, it's just like this is a normal progression, and we're just realizing it now, and this has always been a thing, or is it something that now people we're trying to get some traction on?
No, I think it's picking up now,
I agree.
especially. And I would say with COVID, mental health as a focus in general became, was kind of under the spotlight because so many people were losing jobs, spending countless, months in many cases at home. Um, you know, we were not supposed to be interacting with people socially. And so, you know, being aware of that, I think the awareness, to answer your question, has been elevated with COVID.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think also I'm a big proponent of this. I think social media and the internet, the best way that I try and relate this to people is like memes, for example. The evolution of memes for the public has basically showed you that things like checking behind the shower curtain before you pee is normal. It's like those
Yes.
little things that you always thought that
It's
you were
fun.
the only person that did.
I didn't even think of
The
that.
internet has brought to light for you now. And that's just like a small funny part of it. When you think about that on the internet in general, it's given people a place to talk about things for the first time ever. And in a way that's like very freeing and you can say whatever you want. And I think that's why men, not I don't want to say men, people in general, but more specifically men are evolving the way that they are because they're seeing that they're not the only ones that feel this way.
And then the behaviors that may come natural to us, but that we're kind of unsure about, are normal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're absolutely
I, mean,
normal.
I hate the word normal. They are common. Maybe
sure.
common.
Yeah,
Common's
yeah.
better.
The so I want to circle back actually to that night that Joe hit me up because I think there's a really important piece to this too, which we talk about on almost every single episode here, is that I remember having this conversation with Joe. Like I said, he was in probably, I would say, one of the darkest times that you've had.
Yeah, those 4 or 5 months were, I can confidently say, the darkest of my life by far.
Yeah.
So,
And I remember during that conversation, I had exhausted all of my ability as far as to try and shed some light or some reason or explanation to whatever was going on. And I looked at you and do you remember what I said?
you said, I can't remember verbatim what you said, but you basically said something to the effect of, you can either dwell on this and let it defeat you, or you can do something about it.
And what was that something? To go see a professional.
Right.
I knew it.
Yes.
I knew
And that
it.
was, I never tell someone that they like need therapy because we've talked about it before. Like you go when you feel ready, but throughout that conversation with Joe, I felt, and I'm like, dude, you are ready. You are at that point that I can't help you anymore. As a friend, we're cool, but we're not brothers yet. But like I'm in this middle ground. I want to help you, but I've exhausted all of my ability. I don't know what to do any further. You need to, and you're there. You're at that dark place. You need to see somebody. And what did you do?
I did that.
He did
Good
exactly
for
that.
you. Round of applause.
Yes, thank you.
Always
Thank you.
plug therapy.
So literally the next day, I remember, I mean, shit, we were up till like 3 o'clock in the morning driving around. I mean, like I said, we got Taco Bells, and we all know
Aw.
that Taco Bell's open till like 4 in the morning.
Is
So,
it
yeah, like drive-through Taco Bell is always the late night plug.
4 a.m.?
I think so. Down in Florida, the one right by my house, or down
It was
in
in Riviera Beach.
Yeah, it was in Riviera. Yeah, it was, which is a little
Suspect.
battlegrounds, let's just say. Yeah, so it was open, and but yeah, so I remember like the next morning or whatever, Joe texted me and he was just like, "Hey man, I just want to let you know, thank you first off, blah blah blah, but I also I booked a therapy session. I go next Saturday, and or I think it was Saturday or Friday, some shit, whatever."
So would you be comfortable, Joe? And I think this can relate to a lot of people. Starting therapy is scary. And I think the biggest fear that a lot of people have is like that first initial sit down with like, so what brings you here? What fucked you up? How you feeling? Like, what was that experience like for you?
I would say,
Was it your first time in therapy?
Yeah, I would say so. I
Okay.
mean, I had some issues when I was like a kid, but I was more so brought to therapy by
Right.
my parents.
Mhm,
It wasn't, it wasn't a decision that I made. So, but the interesting thing about it was, and part of the struggle for me was in trying to take that initial step was like, oh, maybe I'm not actually, maybe I don't need this right now. Maybe I'm not that
yes.
bad. Like I don't need this. And I fought it off for so long, and the issues just got worse and worse and worse. And I finally did it. And I was like, okay. this isn't so bad. The hard part is trusting that the person you are talking to, the professional, is invested in what you're saying. Because I think there's this perception that um, whoever you're going to talk to and see doesn't actually care. They're in there for a paycheck. And that may be true in some
That's
cases.
interesting. I've never
Yeah,
thought about it that way before.
that's a lot of pushback that I get from people about going to therapy or initiating that first session is like, well, I don't want to spend money to talk to somebody who doesn't really care about my problems, you know. And
I've never thought about it that way before.
And you know how I would respond to that is I would tell them those people get paid to care about your problems, and you don't.
They
That
also
doesn't.
picked that line of work. It's not like they just stumbled into it like, I guess I'll just be
Yeah,
in
it's not.
school forever to do
Yeah, I guess I'm
this.
gonna be an accountant. Like, you
Of
know what I mean?
course.
Like, no, it's like I go there. You have to go in with that sense of caring and empathy, and if you don't have it, I think you'll realize as you go through the education process to be able to be that professional to sit down and talk to someone. I think, like I said, through that education process, you'll find out very quickly if this is really what you want to do or not.
And not always, because not every therapist rocks and not every therapist drives with you. So that's another important piece of it. Like, just because the first one doesn't really work
Doesn't
Right.
or
mean that there
doesn't
isn't.
click with you. You've had that experience, right, Bobby?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And actually, it was funny. You're a therapist, man or woman.
Woman.
Ah,
That's interesting.
but that's uncommon.
Yeah, because I switched from a female to a male because it's not anything against females. I just connected better with a male, and I just felt like I needed a male perspective. Not that I don't have like a strong male,
Right, right.
you
But
know,
it's
figure
just
in my life. It's
that
just
what is it? The unbiased opinion, like someone that
yeah,
you don't know.
exactly. But so what's that like? You know, did you choose a female on like? Did you say like, hey, you know, this lady kind of I vibe with and whatnot, and it's also a female? Like, was that a bonus? Did you ever think about that, or did you kind of just go, you know what, I'm gonna let this rip and go from here?
Yeah, I essentially just let it rip. I mean, I was looking up highest rated, counselors in my area, and with the help of my mom, she helped me track this lady down. And so I reached out to her and booked the first appointment and went in there. And I was fortunate because it ended up, just being a vibe.
Yeah,
It worked.
I remember when he came out of his appointment, you actually FaceTimed me. I remember because the connection was horrible. It was
With
really,
Shout out
I was
Verizon.
gonna say with the FaceTime, not the therapist.
yeah,
right?
right, right.
yeah, the FaceTime, and it was all like sketchy or whatever. And I was like, "Yo, what's up, man?" And you were like, "Dude, you had like this glow behind you." You were like, "Dude, this was awesome." And I was like, "Well, what did you do?" And you're like, "I don't even know." Like,
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
just went in there and we just talked, and like she was so nice and blah blah blah, and yeah, I just feel great, man. I feel awesome. And I was like, "Let's fucking go."
That
You know what I mean?
that glow was not so much a sense of relief because obviously it took months and months to come out of this dark place. That glow was a newfound sense of hope.
Yes, I love
So,
that.
and that's something that I want to point out to people is mental health is a journey, much like physical health. I mean, you can, the two pretty much they definitely do go hand in hand. But much like trying to build a physique that you put effort into and you work at, mental health is as it also requires similar effort and things that I tools that I didn't have before connecting with this therapist were words of affirmation, practicing self-love, recognizing your value, recognizing why you're valuable, things that you have to offer as an individual. I mean, none of these concepts were things that I had thought about naturally, and many of those were what actually empowered me to pull myself out of this dark place.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what it is. They always say like you have all the tools in you right now. You just don't know how to use them. And I think people in general, right? We say, oh, you can't love someone else until you love yourself. And like I feel like I, until therapy, have spent my whole life like I gotta love myself. I gotta learn how to love myself. And
But it's really hard to, right?
it
Yeah.
is and for some people it comes naturally and that's amazing. I envy them and I'm so happy for them. For me, I needed to sit down with somebody and exactly what you said, like go through what my values are as a person, like what I like about myself, very specific things, even if it's just like I have nice hair. Like that seems so dumb, but I do. And I'm okay. It's okay to be proud of myself for that. You know what I
Sure.
mean? Like just small dumb stuff like that is so impactful.
Yeah, absolutely.
You did mention though that you had the help of your mom looking for a therapist. So like,
I
what
did.
what was that like? Because I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Like my parents found out that I go to therapy through my podcast.
Wow.
Yes. I
Well,
did
That's
not tell them.
shocking.
I did not tell them. And I specifically remember being at the house one time. It was right after the episode that I like first said it in. My parents listen. Shout out to the parents. You know, they listen to every episode.
It's
Um,
sometimes a little bit scary for me, but anyway.
right. Me, how do you think I feel? But yeah, and I remember like my mom just like pulled me aside and was just like, "So you're in therapy?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Are you okay?" Like, I'm like, "Stop. This isn't your job anymore." You know what I mean? Like, I know you care and whatnot, but like, it has nothing to do with you. And even if it did, I talked to my therapist about it.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, it's fine. I'm good. Are you sure you're okay? I'm fine. You know, but they found out through the podcast. So what was that like going to your mom? I mean, you and your mom, first shout out to your mom. She is a fucking goddamn saint. She
she
is,
really is.
she is,
Oh, he just smiled so big and cute.
Yeah, my
yeah,
mom's my best friend.
and she
Shout
is,
out, shout out, mom.
yeah, she is awesome. I met her a couple times and she's just the nicest lady. But what was that like going to her?
That she's always been, my biggest ally in any scenario. And I'm so fortunate to have such a great relationship with my mom and my dad as well. My dad, I was as a kid, I don't think he and I related much because I was, this kid and he was an adult, and I think that was where a lot of our, that kind of created the contention between us. But as I got older and became an adult, he and I, we see, things a little, I see things a little differently, and we tend to agree a lot more. And as a result, we've gotten a lot closer, especially after I moved out. But anyway, to answer your question, my mom was one of the first people I told when I was struggling about what was going on. And she was at first very concerned for me, very worried. And then I think she told me she had a dream. And in her dream, I was just thriving. Like this was in her dream, it was like years down the road. And I was just in such a good place. And she stopped worrying for me and she's like, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to help you out with finding someone. Cause I had mentioned, I was like, maybe I should go talk to someone. She's like, I'm going to help you out with finding someone. And that's exactly what we did. So she found, went on Google, found some therapists, and I did a little research myself, and I was like, here's one that I found. I'm going to go check it out. She's like, definitely do it. And that was that. I mean,
That's beautiful. I said in an episode earlier, for me personally, when I find out that a man's in therapy, to me, it's like husband material because that means like you have the self awareness to say, I can't do this by myself. I need help. And number two, you give a shit
yeah.
to make the change.
Yeah, I would say I guess there's two different ways of looking at that, but you brought up definitely what I would say is the more positive perception of that, which is this is somebody who recognizes that they're a human being. They may need work, and they are putting in the work to better themselves as individuals.
Because it's hard. Therapy's hard.
It is hard, and again, this kind of circles back around to the original point about knowing when you need to reach out for help and doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So and then I would say the more negative approach to it is, oh, this is somebody who's got issues. Maybe I should steer clear. So
See, and I don't see it that way at all, but
Right.
I could totally see how people would.
I mean, I think both are important to recognize because I think there are people who are like you need to make sure you're very prepared yourself. For someone who is, like I mentioned before, like somehow a lot of people's confidant, I need to pick and choose my situations because if I'm not in a good place, and Caitlin, you do this to me all the
I was
time.
gonna say, I just did it to you 2 days ago. I
Yeah.
was gonna bring this up at some point.
Yeah, if I'm not in a good place and like myself, I'm just either stressed out with work, stressed out with podcast shit, girls, whatever the hell it is. And someone's like, dude, I need you. And it's like this fucking wild story. And I just look at it and I go, I am not going to be able to help you. I cannot. I am so exhausted myself. So I think it's very important that when someone does come to you, you need to identify first and foremost, can you handle it? Because the second you say yes, you've made a commitment to that person.
Well, I want to also point out too that people don't always ask, and I think
Yeah.
that's a good
that's a courteous
practice
thing
to
do.
start doing
Yes.
too. Is and I've started doing it with a good friend of mine, saying like, "Hey, I need an ear right now. Are you in a place to take on what I'm dealing with?" And if they say no, I'm cool. And
Yeah.
I'll say, just let me know when you are, because I do need you, but take your time with it.
Exactly. So and I think that goes into having, like I said, being this person that people confide in. I think that also goes into plays into the self-awareness stuff too, which I don't know if therapy has brought out in me or if just maturity or whatever.
I think
But I think
both
that's
from the
most.
outside.
I honestly think it's so important that you make that identification first. That you need to look out for the most important person in your life first and foremost, which is and always will be you.
Yeah.
You are the most important person.
Mhm.
So look at that. I can handle that. Once you make that commitment that I can handle that, then you're moving on and
Right.
you're going from there. That is, you have to do it. And
Yeah.
then at that point you've made the commitment and that person's now that rock, like you said, rock when they're in a hard place. And here you are, you're doing it.
And that there have been a couple of times where, I've had some non-emergencies, but definitely things I want to talk about where you've kind of let me know like, hey, this is not something I can unpack right now.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I totally respect that. And
Right.
and I appreciate the fact that you're honest and you're not just having me talk and not listening to a word I'm saying.
That's what I said to Bobby. To he's like, "Hey, I have a question about a problem. Can you help me with it?" And my exact words were, "I am barely scraping by. I can barely carry my own right now. I can't add yours."
Yeah, and one thing that you said earlier, Joe, is like, oh man, this guy is you're gonna not just hear me and listen. And I've always said this, and I've been saying this, which is really weird to think that I was actually this intelligent as a like 12. But I remember saying back in the day when I was really really young, there is a huge difference, but there's between hearing somebody and listening to someone.
Oh yeah.
Hearing someone right now, I can hear the lights in this room. I can hear the air conditioner kicking off. I can hear my mom cooking upstairs. I can hear that. Listening is when you are taking the information in, analyzing it, interpreting, and most importantly, responding to it. And those are two totally different things. And if you're not ready to listen to someone and only hear them, then you're not in a position to help at all.
And that's okay.
And
Right.
yeah, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it, but you need to be able to, in that split second when someone asks you for help, okay, you need to make that decision. Can I do this?
I disagree. I don't think you have to respond right away. I think
I'm not
you
saying
can
like
give
right
yourself
away.
some
I'm not saying it
time.
doesn't, but like that's what you need to start thinking about right away. You need to be
Right.
like, can I do this?
Can
Can I
I
help?
carry this right now? Do I
Yes.
have the strength to carry this? And if you don't,
Yes.
that's
And if
okay.
you need a minute to think if you do or not, that's fine. But that should be the first thought is, can I handle this? You know what I mean? And I think that's extremely important. So I do want to just say that we just took a quick break here.
And we
Well-
do that sometimes. We just don't tell you guys.
Yes, yes. And my mom was upstairs making chocolate chip cookies from scratch.
Oh, those were from scratch?
Of
Yeah.
course.
That explains it. I'm sitting here thinking, which dough was that?
Yeah. It was
Wow.
Yeah. That is-
all of us just stared at each other and ate the cookie, and we're like, "What?"
And then, I found even this is so stupid. We collectively agreed that we should say it on the podcast.
Yeah.
And not one person argued.
Yeah, we're like, we should mention that
Great.
we took a break and ate like one of the greatest cookies of all time, right? And we're like, yes. Why would you think any differently? So to get back into the substance of this, Joe, if you're comfortable, do you mind sharing about like that dark time in your life that we were speaking of? You don't have to say everything, and if there are certain things that you don't want to say,
Yeah.
but like, what was that like for you? What what challenges were you facing? What obstacles were in your way and whatnot?
Yeah. So, at the time, I had I was starting to have some weird medical issues. A lot of things relating to my stomach and like pains in my back and stuff. And unfortunately, I made the mistake. And just a word of advice to all listeners out there: if you're having any sort of medical symptoms, do not, under any circumstance, Google those symptoms.
No, no, you're like, my toe kind of hurts, and like, we're gonna have to remove your foot.
Yeah,
you're like,
you're dying.
you're like, oh my god.
But unfortunately, I made that mistake, and I had actually also recently gone through a breakup. So in hindsight, I think I attribute a lot of the emotional volatility at that time to that breakup. And so I Googled these symptoms, and Google came back and was like, "Hey, this sounds like pancreatic cancer." And what made the issue that much scarier for me was I had an uncle who I never met that died at 30 or 31 years old of pancreatic cancer.
Oof.
This
And
was
Joe, you're only
26.
26.
Oh, you're a baby. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's cute.
Hey.
That's why
um,
we call you Joey. He's
yeah.
cute.
Joey Cheesecake.
Joey Cheesecake. I gave him that nickname. Makes no
Why
sense.
cheesecake?
Well-
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Because your last name's the same as a cheesesteak place.
I know. So since I got up to Philly, I was like, you can now call me Joey Cheesesteak.
Yes.
I love that.
Yes. So that's his thing.
That's what we're calling him from now on. Okay, continue.
So, I was convinced that given the persistence of these symptoms and the Google search results, that was my fate, and it had been decided, and that my days were numbered.
Now, do you think that dark outlook stemmed from the place that you were already in?
Yeah, with the breakup, you mean?
As far as like if your mental health had been better, do you think you would have gotten that dark that quickly, that definitively?
I would say that I was definitely a younger person then who did not focus on mental health, who didn't focus on mental wellness, and maybe wasn't aware of habits that I had that could have contributed to maintaining this negative mindset. So I started going to get tests done, and I had a whole bunch of things done. I had an X-ray, I had an MRI, I had blood drawn, and all of those tests were popping up negative. But I was so stuck in this faux reality that this is what was happening that I stopped eating because in my head I could not stomach food. It just didn't sit right, and it just felt like it wasn't digesting properly. And so for at least 2 weeks, I was surviving on maybe a couple of spoonfuls of soup a day and like some crackers that I could barely get down, and water. And I lost 30 pounds.
And you're not a big dude, so
I'm not.
For Joe to lose 30 pounds would be equivalent to me losing like a lot.
I mean, you were there. I would say it was a pretty drastic change.
Yeah.
You could see, and people at work were going, "Dude, what is wrong with you? Like, you look really ill." And I was sharing with them. I was like, "Here's what I'm pretty certain is happening to me." And I was so convinced because I had this uncle, and I thought, well, if my uncle had it, maybe it runs in the family, yada, yada. That's probably definitely what was going on. I was making these self-diagnoses without really even paying attention to what the actual diagnoses were saying.
That's crazy.
They were like, yeah,
That's
you're
wild.
fine. You're fine. There's nothing going on. And the final procedure I had done was an endoscopy because they were like, well, you're having these stomach pains and these issues and these, pain off to your side where your pancreas is located and stuff. And they were like, maybe you're actually just having a stomach issue, because I ended up going to a gastroenterologist. But I do want to point out, I did not have the mental confidence or the strength to make that appointment myself because it was a big procedure. And I was caught in this sort of catch-22 where I was like, okay, well, I don't know for certain right now that this is happening because there hasn't been a test that said, yes, you definitely have something, you have some terminal illness. And so I was like, oh, maybe I don't actually know that's the case, but do I want to find out? Do I want to know if that's actually what's going on? And so it was such a struggle to get these appointments scheduled, to have the blood drawn, to have the, the CAT scan, the MRI, and eventually the endoscopy, which is, for those of you that don't know, they knock you out and stick a camera down your throat. I will say the anesthesia was probably the best nap I've ever had.
Yeah,
Phenomenal.
I actually know some people that have gotten them before.
Yeah. And what they found was just that I had gastritis, which is just swelling of the stomach lining, or inflammation rather, of the stomach lining, which given American diets is not uncommon at all. And it's not really anything to worry about either. But I want to point out that my therapist was actually the one that empowered me to make that phone call. She's like, I will be right here with you. Let's do it together. And we did. And I got that scheduled. And once, it was so funny. I woke up from the anesthesia, and my gastroenterologist, the doctor, comes in, and he's just like texting on his phone. He was smiling at something. I was like, this dude just kind of doesn't care, whatever. And he's like, oh, hey, you're awake. I was like, oh, yeah, what's going on? He's like, yeah, it's just gastritis. You're good. And I was like, well, that was pretty nonchalant. And he walked out, and that was the end of that. So, but none of that, I think none of that would have happened without the help of my therapist.
So can I ask, and This is just from an outsider's perspective because I don't know you that well at all, and I
Yeah.
don't know what that whole situation was like for you. Number one, I want to point out that the power of the human mind. Number
Yes.
one, because I
Yes.
think from hearing this,
This is all self-inflicted.
100. I don't, and I don't mean to be like you did this, but your brain did this to you,
Oh,
more
I
or
can
less. And
I can tell you, like, talking to Joe, I mean, I'll say this now because you're in a way better place and whatnot. Talking to Joe
was that frustrating
during
for you?
it was almost unbearable. And like I did it because I love him, it's my buddy, but like it was everything was negative. Everything was negative. Everything was it doesn't matter, I'm probably gonna die. I'm probably gonna have this. And it's like, dude, you don't know that. Stop. But it was like there was no telling you otherwise. You were the sales pitch was made and the car was fucking sold and that was it.
Sitting here having met you now and then hearing this story, I'm like blown away. Like
Yeah.
I've only known you for a few hours, but that does not sound like you at all. So I think to say like, wow, the power that your mind has when you're in a dark place, and maybe you were in a dark place before this and you really didn't even realize it, and this is how it manifested in your life through you picking a physical illness, but really your brain was the thing that needed the help.
Yeah, absolutely. I made that my reality, and I was living everything about it except having the actual condition itself.
That's wild.
So I'm sitting there losing weight rapidly. I'm not sleeping. I did not want to get out of bed. Going to work, just so you know, I absolutely hated my job at that time, and it showed. My coworkers knew it, and customers knew it too. And I can say, fortunately, I have made a complete 180. Love what I do now. Very invested in it, and that was just. I feel that entire experience for me, as bad as it was, had to happen. And I can't exactly tell you why, but I look at that in retrospect and I'm like, I grew immensely from that. And it was powerful, and it has changed who I guess I was becoming into somebody that I am so proud to be today.
Good for you.
And that all started with a 4 a.m. Taco Bell run.
Really? Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a fucking little cheesy gordilla crunch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I also want to circle back, which I actually have the title of this episode already in my head right now.
Love
but
that.
so I want to circle back again. You had mentioned some stuff with your dad. You mind unpacking that a little bit? Like, as far as, do you think that had anything to do with your, like I said, this whole episode's really about like kind of mental health and the like male to male relationship. So like,
Sure.
what was that like?
So my dad and I, we've always been affectionate toward one another. And it was just, I know people that have had way worse relationships with their dad. And I would say overall as a whole, I did not have a bad relationship with my
Can
dad.
I just stop you there though? That's what people do that's wrong, is they look at what they're living with and they say, well, I know people have it worse. So I want to say, whatever it is,
It
was
doesn't
real.
matter if you're struggling with it. You're
It was
struggling
real
with
to
it.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
and allow it to have that importance in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I would do things as a kid that kids do, and my mom, pointed out, especially as I got older, like, hey, and explaining to my dad, I feel like your reaction to what he did was a little bit disproportionate to what is called for in that scenario, and I would just get yelled at constantly, and I think it was my dad's way of just showing tough love, and I have no regrets about that.
Do you have siblings? Are you an only child?
I have a half brother that's 15 years older than me.
Okay.
I'm not super close with him because
Okay.
we never really lived together, so we didn't grow up together.
So it was
anything like that.
essentially you were the only kid in the house.
So yeah,
Okay.
I was an only child, and I am my dad's only child, and I definitely don't want this to sound like my dad is a bad guy. He's one of my absolute favorite people, and we are so close now. But he would always tell me he was proud of me and things like that. It's just when I would do something that was, I needed to be scolded for or reprimanded for, it would just kind of get blown out of proportion, and it would often turn into screaming matches. I'd be yelling at him, he'd be yelling at me, and that was a pretty regular thing. And then as I got older, we kind of grew away from that, and I went to college, and that's when our relationship really blossomed, I would say, and I'm so glad to have that now. But it's funny that you actually asked about my relationship with my dad, Bobby, and how that may have shaped the negative mindsets and sort of how I reacted to these sort of pretty much minor things that were happening in my body, because my therapist actually asked the same question. She was asking,
Boom.
do you think that, you know, your relationship with your parents as a whole maybe impacted this? And when you were saying these negative things to yourself, does it sound like you or does it sound like someone else? And you know, I really had to think about that one. She's like, I don't want you to think too hard, but um, I would say that yeah, it's possible that the projected negativity did kind of shape how I reacted to things, and a lot of it was probably learning based. You know, I'd see how he reacts to stuff, and naturally I would kind of react the same way, you
Mm-hmm.
know, negatively. And I think he's actually moved away from a lot of that negativity as well. He's pretty optimistic these days about a lot of things, and I appreciate that about him. So it's in a way, it's almost like I've grown and he's grown as an adult, much older than I, but our paths are almost parallel in that sense.
Yeah. It's funny you talk about your dad that way because, and it's weird how like every relationship is so different. I was actually talking about this with my buddy Pete at dinner the other night, and he would be actually a great person to bring on to talk about that. But like my relationship with my dad is almost the polar opposite. Like me and my dad, like don't get me wrong, my dad's a homie. Like he is so cool. Like he's literally one of my best friends. But it's really weird. Like younger, I remember like almost just like yeah, he yelled at me in the sense, but never really affected me in that way. Me and my dad get in screaming matches more now than we did when I was younger. But we like care. Like it's really weird. Like they're
It's
not.
because you and your dad are the same exact person.
Yeah, but like, but it's funny when we scream at each other. It like, or like when we like have elevated conversations. Let's say I don't want to say scream because I feel
Yeah.
like that's negative. When we have elevated conversations, they're never with like ill intentions. They're never negative. I mean, the subject of what we're talking about might be negative, but we're never like fuck you about it. You
Yeah,
know what
you're
I
never
mean? Like
venomous about it at all.
great
Yeah.
word. Yeah, we're
Mhm.
never. Yeah, and it's really weird where yours was the opposite. It was almost venomous when you were younger, and then now you kind of come full circle and getting back into it. And now me and my dad, where it was like this, and we went the opposite way, but it wound up being better because me and my dad are literally best friends. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And it's weird how like your relationship with your father is polar opposite than my relationship with my father, but they both had the same impact and they're both positive impact. Like,
Yeah.
and how it's just different for other people. So
I would say, and I would say in a lot of ways, my dad has taught me some of the most valuable lessons in my life, and I
oh,
will forever be grateful for that. Like
pick one. If you get, I have one right off the top of my head that my dad said, "What is
one,
one thing that you learned from me that you'll take to your grave?" And I
yeah,
know right off.
and I have mine too. I mean, there's a list after that, but the
Yeah.
first one that always comes to mind is integrity. That's
Okay.
one of the biggest things that my dad has always been, just a very honest person, and I really have taken that and owned integrity and honesty almost to a fault sometimes, where there, you know, I'm just straightforward about things that I maybe just shouldn't talk about at all. But that's, you know, I feel like that's what I owe people, and I'm so grateful to him for that. But I would also say in a lot of ways that I've taught him as well.
Mm-hmm.
He's learned a lot by having a son, and I think he has really learned to you know, deal with the challenges of that, because again, I was his only child, and I'm just, again, I keep using the word grateful, but I'm so grateful that we have this relationship now, and I can say with confidence that we have taught each other a lifetime's worth of lessons.
I think that's so important too. I think that piece of it that you mentioned is that we as kids grow up and our parents teach us a lot. And I think a parent's ability to recognize that they can learn from their children too is so huge. And a lot of parents don't choose to do that. And that might be where the relationship doesn't progress and doesn't get any better. But I think if they
Yeah,
if they
hits a
can,
wall.
yeah. Because I think I've said this for forever. Childhood trauma, I mean, even if you don't think you have it, you probably do, right? And I think that what I've learned again over the last couple of months has been I am this way because my mom and my dad did this, and they did this because of what their parents did to them. And not
Right.
even like did to them, but just you're a product of your environment. You know what I
Of
mean? And
course.
you're doing your best and you don't know and you think you're doing well. And I think for me personally, and not everybody's the same way, but it's helpful for me to repair things when I learn the why of it, right? So
Right.
if like very much like you said, like, are those words coming from you or are they coming from somebody else? Yes, it's important to recognize that, but it's also so important to not get stuck in that and be
Right.
like, well, I did this because this is what my dad did to me my whole life. I didn't make this behavior up by myself.
That
This
becomes
was
your
passed
crutch.
on to me. And I think
Yeah.
there's an important moment where it's you can live in that for a minute and feel bad for yourself and realize, yes, I am the victim of this and I'm allowed to be sad about it. But then you have to say, okay, well, this is my reality. And now it's time to come up with coping strategies and unlearn those behaviors and move forward. Because if you get stuck in that, like that can be paralyzing forever.
I want to shout out my mom again. She's someone who had a very rough childhood, ended up raising, I believe, 5 siblings on her own because
Mhm.
she had a mother that was not the most competent mother, unfortunately. And she took all of those lessons and learns from her childhood and all of the trauma that she experienced and really with how rough that childhood was, and became an absolute saint. She did the exact opposite with her children.
Mhm.
And I don't I don't spend a lot of time studying parent to child dynamics in families, but I don't know of a lot of other parents that can say the same.
Mm.
My mom is, I love her to death. She is a shining star in terms of parenthood.
Yeah, absolutely. We've mentioned it before. She's so freaking cool.
Yeah.
She's the nicest lady on the planet. I want to circle to the original topic here, which I mean, it's all related. Obviously, that's how we ended up here. Is this male to male appreciation? And recently, as we've mentioned before on last episode, we had a tragic accident with a friend of ours and our group friend with Scott. And I know you wanted to speak to that a little bit, so you had asked me to speak to that, and here's your time.
Yeah, so for those of you that didn't know, Scott, who's a really close buddy of Bobby's and someone who I've been really getting to know recently. Scott had an accident where he fell off a skateboard and hit his head, um, and it caused a pretty considerable brain injury. He's actually still in the hospital, and this happened now 2 weeks ago.
Hmm.
So I wanted to talk about being intentional with appreciation and affection, especially for guys in your life, guy to guy interactions, and even with girls as well. It's hugely important because there are going to be accidents that happen. There will always be tragedies, and one of my biggest fears, and I would say Mike says this too, is having deathbed regrets. I don't want to have to look back after somebody else has passed, maybe unexpectedly, and say, "Man, I should have let them know. I should have, resolved that issue we maybe had. I should have squashed that beef with them." And even if you're not, having any sort of struggle in the moment with somebody, I think it's important to recognize their strengths, to just appreciate them, let them know why you appreciate them and that you love them, and that's a huge thing to do. I'm fortunate to work in my sales job where it's a culture that promotes positive feedback and recognition, and I think that's huge, and it's become something that for me has branched outside of my work life. And I have a friend, I have Bobby, who has really um, taken that and owned that opportunity to tell your homies, "Hey, I love you, dude. I really
Hmm.
do love you. You're hugely important to me." And Scott's accident reminded me that, hey, we're really just going to take this opportunity to let him know and let everyone else know too that they are loved and why they're loved.
And I think too, when men reinforce each other that way, it automatically translates to how they treat women, whether it's sisters, mothers, friends, girlfriends, whatever that looks like. I
Absolutely.
think if men can do that to each other, that's harder. I would imagine, I can't speak to it, but that's probably harder than doing it with a girl.
Yeah, because you're supposed to with a girl.
It quotes supposed to.
Yeah, you're
Right.
supposed to, right? That's like you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to do this and that. And guys, you're not supposed to tell your homie you love them. That's gay. Like
Right.
no, it's
Yeah.
not,
Hmm.
dude. Shut
That's the
up. It's the
stigma.
fucking stupidest thing I've ever heard on the planet. It's not. I love everybody. You know what I mean? Well, that's I actually hate everyone, but no. But the people I choose to surround myself with, like I said before, I challenge you to find better friends than me, and because it's impossible. And
Because you receive, in my opinion, you receive the love that you give and you give love.
yeah, I mean, thank you. I appreciate
It's
that.
true. I mean,
Yeah,
I say, like, if you see a dude that can tell their bro that they love them, like, he's gonna love you as a woman better than the man that can't. because if he
agree with
can't
that.
even tell his friend that he loves him, chances are you're going to have to pull it out of him in other ways
Yeah.
with you.
And I think, with Scott's situation, it's been really cool to see like the squad
Oh
really
my God.
like rally up behind.
Incredible. And even people that don't know him.
Like our listeners, shout out to them.
Yeah.
If
I
you guys
know.
haven't donated, if you'd like to, the link is in our bio.
Yes.
Linktree/irregular. It's the
And-
first.
And
link
I can
in
tell you
there.
this too. That first couple days that the GoFundMe was up, I was scrolling through and I saw donations from people of my friends who straight up don't know this person at
Yeah.
all. Never seen
Me
them.
too.
They know him because they know me, and that's pretty much it. And I seen them give more money than I gave. You know what I mean? And I'm like, "Jeez, like you didn't have to do that."
Yeah.
And people were like, "Dude, I knew you cared, so I care." And I'm like, that
Oh,
is
I love that.
so big.
yeah.
I love
That is
that.
so big. And that appreciation came from both male and females
Oh,
as
yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Like actually Mike out in Utah literally threw a couple bucks in, and his comment was, "I don't personally know Scott, but I heard he's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Speedy recovery, brother." You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I actually got a lot of DMs about how hot he is. I'm not gonna
it's-
lie.
he's a stud, bro. I mean,
And his voice, ooh, voice of an angel.
this is true. This is true. But I think that's really important to recognize when we see it happening, and let that snowball into your life. You know what I
Of
mean? Like
course.
it's unfortunate that this happened with Scott, but if you felt impacted enough to give your own money to Scott, why don't you take some of that feeling and that drive and use it in your personal life?
And that in bringing up Scott's situation, that was kind of the advice that I wanted to impart is don't wait for a tragedy to take the opportunity to love and appreciate someone. Use this as an opportunity to recognize, hey, something bad happened to someone. I don't know them personally, and I wanted to do something to contribute to their cause,
Mhm.
and take that love, that universal love, and just share that with the people in your life. And maybe it's somebody that you aren't super close with. Maybe use it as an opportunity to get to know somebody and cultivate another close relationship, and let somebody know that they are important and why they're important.
I think one of the most important things you said there is share it with the people in your life. That doesn't mean you have to share it with everyone, because I think people
Right.
get scared. I think that's why a lot of people don't do it. Again, especially men, are afraid to relinquish that love to other people.
Oh yeah,
You know what I
absolutely,
mean?
yeah.
So you don't have to give it to everybody. You
Right.
get to, guess what? Life is full of choices, and you get to choose who you get to relinquish that to. Just be mindful of it now. You know what I mean? Like I think
And not afraid of it.
and not
Right.
be mindful and not afraid that like you have it in you. Everyone I would like to believe that everybody has it in them, to share it. So share it. You know what I mean? Like why not?
Yes, let's spread that love. All right, Joey, thank you for joining us today. As always, we like to give our guests kind of a closing argument. Anything that you would like to leave our guests thinking about or mention before we head out?
Yeah. Kind of on the backside of that, kind of where we just wrapped up there was just a quick brief conversation I actually had with your friend Bobby, Anthony, last night, Wags, as you call
I was
him.
gonna say we all know him as
Yeah,
Wagner,
Wag-
but
Wagner,
Yeah.
He and I were just shooting the shit at the bar, and I was kind of explaining to him about what I had planned to talk about today on the podcast, and we got talking about it, and I went over sort of the main points that we've already touched on, but something that he brought up that was super important was, hey, checking in on your friends and sharing your love and appreciation for them in many cases can be sometimes the difference between somebody carrying on and possibly ending their life.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have to be somebody that you're super close with. But again, I just, the advice I want to give is appreciate the people in your life. If there's somebody that plays a prominent role, whether you're super close with them, whether they're your best friend or maybe they're your coworker who you get along with, I think it's important to spread that love, because you never know what they're going through, and that may give them an opportunity to talk about it. Again, if you're like we were saying, if you're equipped to take that on, it might be a great opportunity to allow them to open up about it. And again, that could be the difference. And I know a lot of people say that, hey, it can make a difference in someone's life, but that really is the truth. You can kind of do your part, especially if you're in a good place and you feel like you can allow somebody to lean on you a little bit. then by all means do that, and do not be afraid of doing it, and don't be afraid to reach out when you're in that time of need. So
I do also just want to point out too that I've always said that you are very similar to Wagner, and it's really funny how this is pretty much like the first real time you got to hang out with him, and look at who gravitated towards each
I
other.
love it.
Do you
I
really,
love
isn't
it.
that really weird how that
Yeah.
played out? You know, like because I had actually taken a phone call from Scott while we were hanging out last night, so I was away, and I came back. I'm like, "Yo, how you doing, Joe? Like everything?" He's like, "Oh yeah, me and Wagner were shooting the shit." I'm like,
Yeah, you were.
"Of course you two were." You know what I mean? Like, of course you two were. That's funny how that works. Joe, thank you.
thank you both, as always. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
I was going to say, I would like to end this with letting both of you know that I appreciate you.
No,
And I appreciate
thanks,
both of you
Caitlin.
as well.
And we appreciate our listeners. We appreciate this day. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
This was awesome.
Yeah, this is awesome. Joe, feel free if you want to be that shoulder to lean on for someone else. Feel free to plug any social media if you want to, and go from there.
Yeah, if any of you are looking to reach out, connect with a pretty dope dude, my Instagram is 5.J0E, so 5.Joe, a reference to 5.0, like a Mustang.
I
Unfortunately,
was so confused and now I get it.
yeah,
Okay.
5.0. I've got so many nicknames. The list just goes on and on and on.
Joey Cheesesteak.
That's what I'm calling you.
And Joey Cheesesteak. Yeah, feel free to pop in the DMs, be like, "What's going on, Joey Cheesesteak?"
Yeah, there we go.
How is it that you have like a catchphrase and I don't? Yeah, what the hell?
I know he's been on 2 episodes.
I hate it
You've-
here. Just kidding. Love you guys.
I hate it here. On that note, you guys know the drill. Feel free to follow the Irregular Instagram page at Irregular Podcast. Also follow my personal page at Yobob, EYOOO_BOB.
And my personal Instagram page at Katie_ANI. It's KAITY_ANI. We are looking for guests, as you guys know. Slide in the DMs. We have some exciting things coming up that I can't wait for you guys to see. But till then, we will talk to you next Thursday.
Love you.